Our next presenter joined the staff of Americans for Arts in April of 2006. As Senior Director of Arts Policy, her primary current focus includes arts and military and veterans issues. She helped initiate and now facilitates the National Initiative for Arts and Health in the Military. This effort brings all branches of the U.S. military in collaboration with civilian agencies and their use of arts as tools for health of active duty military, staff, family, veterans, and their caregivers. Americans for the Arts administers the expansion of creative forces for the NEA. Please welcome Marete Wester.
I'll just talk a little bit about the origins of Creative Forces, the NEA Military Healing Arts Network. Initially begun in 2011, it was an effort on behalf of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with the U.S. Department of Defense, and took place at the home site, kind of the mothership, if you will, at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda and the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. And what was interesting about that initial premise and that partnership with the NICO is one of the elite facilities that was at the forefront of treating the signature wounds of war from the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, and that is post-traumatic stress brought on by traumatic brain injury. And the premise initially at the NICO was to have an interdisciplinary team of specialists look at how they treat these injuries. And what was very interesting about that initial modality was the inclusion of art therapy by licensed, trained clinical professionals as actual part of the clinical team. The NEA came to the NICO after a history of working with the military in other venues, in Blue Star museums, theaters, Operation Homecoming. But based on their partnership, what the NEA was able to do initially at the NICO was to look at this modality, this idea of including art therapy as part of the clinical treatment of patients suffering with these wounds, and bring in additional resources. So Nolan talked a little bit about this. What was the challenge when Creative Forces was under development? The challenge, people returning with injuries, more casualties coming through every day. How are we going to address healing these wounds? Through the disciplines of art, music, dance, writing, not only, as I mentioned, the clinical component with art and music therapy, but also as Congress looked at the value of this program and authorized the NEA to begin to expand into other military and veteran-based medical centers, they wanted to see how we could actually describe a pathway that goes from the clinic into the community to serve patients and their families dealing with these signature wounds. This is the video. It's a really good video. If you recognize, or if the couple, Captain and Mrs. Avila, look familiar, you may have seen them last year on NPR and at the national concert during Memorial Day. So it is an extraordinary testament to what can be accomplished in the face of enormous odds. As the video demonstrates, what Creative Forces is building around this network of clinical sites is a continuum that helps patients and their families transition from the clinic into the community by utilizing the arts that were part of the healing process at the clinic, and then taking those tools into ongoing programs in the community where they become part of a life practice. So these are the sites where we are currently functioning at the clinical level at Creative Forces. So we're in Alaska. We are at Camp Pendleton in California, the James A. Haley Veterans Hospital in Tampa, again, the Corps, NICO, and Fort Belvoir, the Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, North Carolina, Fort Hood, Texas, and Joint Expeditionary Base in Virginia Beach, and the Madigan Army Medical Center in Tacoma, Washington. So many branches that are involved in it. Again, extended benefits. What's interesting about Creative Forces is it begins in the clinic, and then we are charting a course of how we really extend into this larger community to help aid the healing process. The reason Creative Forces focuses on this particular issue, the TBI, is that and associated PTSD, is really the sheer numbers and the nature of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the majority of the severe injuries that were coming back. Across the entire clinical program, a focus is not only dealing with the physical injuries of the TBI, but also the emotional and the social components of it. This is a rather complicated chart, but it really demonstrates a little bit of the growth of Creative Forces. When it started as a clinical-based program at the NICO and Fort Belvoir, we've now, over the past year and a half, expanded to include creative arts therapies at each of the clinical sites, but have also been working on a community engagement plan that has brought in partners at the state and local level, first in dialogue at community engagement summits, and then also to build out a plan for how these communities can actually trace that clinical to community pathway. So the network includes both clinical and community. We are also working on a capacity initiative that eventually is going to result in an online national resource center that is bringing all of the aspects of Creative Forces, including the research that's happening at the clinical level and the rollout of community-based impact into a place that is accessible to everyone beyond the community. I talked a little bit about the clinical sites, but we also are doing a telehealth pilot that's beginning in Florida that we hope to also create connections with in Alaska as well. Communities, state and local arts agencies, some of our partners. Again, the Digital Resource Center under construction, something that we're working on, and I made it with under 30 seconds, thanks to the timer. In any event, keep posted. We hope to actually launch the online National Resource Center later this year. The NEA, the materials that we do have are up on the NEA's website. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today.